Hi everyone and welcome back to Wargame. Today I'm going to be building a deck because Grigory very kindly bought me the nation deck for the Netherlands. So today we're going to be building a Dutch-German Corps deck because why not have the best of both worlds? They both have some very good units and when you put them together you can make some fantastic decks. Today we'll do a general deck, I'll also work out and do a tank deck, and I'll probably do some kind of motorized or mechanized deck as well because they're just very versatile and have a lot of good units. There will be more WARNO at some point this week. There have been some issues the last week with desyncs in the tournament, which is obviously causing issues for who's won what, and then people saying I won this and I won this, but then having to look and see, oh, they desynced, and it's a whole hullabaloo. But we will get around to doing some more WARNO later in the week once we can see that that's somehow resolved. UGen have been made aware. Right, onto this deck. So, logistics for the Dutch-German Corps. The Dutch don't bring much to the table here. I'll be completely honest with you. They bring an armoured truck for supply. It's quite expensive for what it is. It's only got 500 supply. Don't waste your time. They have a 15-point supply truck with 800 litres. Don't waste your time. They have a Leopard 1 command tank if you're that fussed, but honestly don't bother. You've got a Leopard 2 command tank with the Germans. Vehicles wise, I mean, the Fuchs is faster. That has one more armor, but really, I mean, it's a personal choice. You know me, I love my command infantry. If you're playing anything other than a tactical game, please do not just take command infantry. You need to take one of the vehicle options as well, because 3 command are not enough. You need loads more. So I would highly recommend taking one of these guys or one of these guys, because these guys have 4, these guys have 7. Well worth it, just for having something quick, cheap that you can bring in. Now, I'm going to go with the German guys. You could go with the Dutch guys, but I think just for the sake of the Fuchs being extremely fast, it's a better option for me. You get 3 trained either way. It doesn't matter which one you bring. They both have 5 strength. Neither are anything special. You want a fob. Definitely with this deck, you want a fob. I will note right now they have some very good artillery options and some very good air options, but they will need a resupply quite often, and they will drain a fob. So bring your own for this deck, especially if you're planning to use the artillery in it. It doesn't matter which one you bring, they're exactly the same. I could be awkward and just make everything in here German. I'm going to take the Jupiter because I like having a cheap option, and I'm just going to take the Mancati as well because a more expensive option is fine as well. You could just take 2 of the Mancati and have as much supply as possible if you wanted. It really doesn't matter. But because I play tacticals, I like to have a variety of pricing options because I could desperately need supply and I've only just hit 20 points and then I'd be waiting a long time to get to 30. Let's move on to infantry. Choices here. There are some good options for the Dutch and there are some bad options. Let's cover quickly anti-air. So you get the Fliegerfaust and the Fliegerfaust 2 from the Germans. And you only get the Stingers from the Dutch. The Stingers, if we pin it, are basically exactly the same as the Fliegerfaust. However, if you click on the Fliegerfaust, you can see that its accuracy is much higher. So if you're going to get one, get the Fliegerfaust 2. It's not that much more expensive and it's much more worthwhile. Get it in the cheapest vehicle you can. Depends how fast you need it to the front lines. I'll bring it in the Fuchs, why not? Just bring 7 trained. I like to have a manpad in my deck. They're good for harassment, they're good for taking out choppers, they're good for taking out aircraft that fly right over the top of them. Everyone has different feelings about it, but I recommend them because they are very annoying when they kill your plane and you didn't realise they were there. In terms of infantry, most of us will know the German infantry pretty well. You got the Fallschirmjäger and their advanced prototype variant. And you've got the Milans and everything, and you've got the Panzer Grenadiers, and that's about it for the Germans. But now we can have a look at the Dutch stuff. So the Dutch have some interesting units. They have Grenadiers, which are your standard infantry. They're pretty cheap. They just have a law and foul, and they're nothing special, honestly, but they're pretty cheap. I'd certainly consider them if you wanted a cheap option for throwing into random towns. Corpse Marines. Oh, Corpse Mariners to be exact, and Corpse Mariners 95, the prototype variant. These units are amazing. They are 15 man, so 15 strength squads, and they're elite. 15 man squads are generally quite expensive anyway. I'm thinking Buffaloes for the South Africans, they're really good. These guys are great. Now, what you would sometimes worry about is they've got an AT4 and the AP power is only 19, but look at the rate of fire. It's 20 rounds a minute. That's double what all the other infantry here have. So these guys are actually really good. I mean, I'd even consider bringing these in choppers to be an advanced force, but I always get choppers shot down. So I'm going to bring them in the standard vehicle, which is reasonably fast. You could also go for the LVT4 because it's amphibious, but I think these guys are fine. 9 veterans, great. Honestly, I would even consider bringing their cheaper variant because they're still really good, but I'll come back to that. You get these guys, they're 5 points, they're militia. I can't recommend militia, they die very quickly. Panzer Grenadiers, you know these guys are good. Obviously, you want the 90 variant, the prototype variant, and these guys, just go the whole hog. Bring them in the Marder 2, and the Marder 2 is fantastic. Bring them hardened, you don't need veteran. Get them in there. Panzer Grenadiers, AP power 24, fantastic. Any tank gets near them, it's dead. You get the Stuttertruppen. These guys, again, very good. They have the 95 variant. Can I just also mention that the Dutch prototype variants do not cost any more? I don't know why. I don't know if it's a mistake and they forgot to do it, but every other prototype version costs at least 5 points more. You can see that with the Panzer Grenadiers. 20 points, 25 points. But all the Dutch ones, they don't cost any more. They're exactly the same price. These guys, again, pretty decent in terms of just shock infantry. They're pretty cheap. I'd bring these guys in as well, and you can bring them in a reasonably cheap vehicle there, which isn't too slow. Autonomy isn't great, but it's good enough. I'd bring these guys in. Again, I'd bring in the more advanced variant. In terms of vehicles, you have a choice. You either have the AMX or this guy. They both have the same weapon on. They're pretty darn similar, to be fair. This one's slightly faster, and it's amphibious, so go with that. 15 hardened. We've got loads of infantry now. Then your option is whether you bring Fallschirmjäger or something. But you've already got some pretty elite troops, and you've got some really good troops here. I kind of want to bring the Milans, so you have some anti-tank that's long range, because, you know, there are those sticky situations. You could also consider something like the Marder 1A3 for infantry, because they do have the Milans with that range as well. They just can't hide in a building. Personally, I'd grab the Milans, but again, depends how you're planning to use your deck. If you're planning to use it infantry heavy, then I'd take some more standard infantry. But I'm going to take these guys because I do like having the option. And vehicle wise, I'm going to take them in the Fuchs because I want them at the front line pretty fast. And I'd actually get 7 hardened just for the additional bonus in terms of their accuracy. Simple as that. Full. Let's move on to support. So support is a really mixed bag for the Dutch. They get French, German, American, British stuff in their entire deck, and here is no different. They get a really big weird mixture of stuff. Now, what I am going to say is, unlike a lot of other decks, including the German ones you can compare it to here, the Dutch seem to have some amazing targeting computers because their dispersion on their artillery is loads better than the competition. Let me choose the big howitzer because these things are accurate as it is anyway. So the M110A2, pin it there. And if you compare that to the M110, can you see the dispersion difference there? Now, I'll grant you this is the standard M110 instead of the A2, but it's still a huge difference. The A3 as well. Let me just pin that. So this is the A3GA1. That's the dispersion on it. And if we just scroll up here and go for the NL version, look at the dispersion and the range on it. Now it costs more, and it's the A5 variant, but it's still pretty good. So these are well worth it for the extra cost. You could go for the super cheap standard A3, but obviously your dispersion goes out the window then. But, you know, in terms of options, having the option of the A5 with the Netherlands, really good. Let's talk about anti-air first though, because that's probably the most important thing in this deck. You get cheaters with the Dutch. Now the cheaters are pretty good. They're radar, but the problem is the Jeopards are better. The Jeopards have stabilizers. So you're better off getting the Jeopard. And if you're going to get one, get the Jeopard A2, because it also has the stingers, so you can turn the radar off and it can still shoot at aircraft. You also get the Rolands, which are obviously very good. Now, the nice thing about the Rolands is the amount of missiles they have. 10 missiles. Decent range. If you're going to get one, get the Roland 3. It is much better than the Roland 1 in terms of its range against choppers in particular, which is quite important. But let's just quickly scroll down. So the Dutch get the IHawk, H-E-O-S. This is an incredible unit. Look at the range on that for aeroplanes. 4,200 meters, and it's not radar. You need this in your deck. Now, it's not got the best accuracy, only 50%, but just get full trained. The more the merrier in this case. The problem you have with these guys is they only have 3 missiles each. You are going to have a supply truck near them all the time. You also get the option of the IHawk with radar guidance. Now, this means they can be shot by seaplanes, but look at the range on helicopters. 3,325. That outranges, I think, any helicopter missile. So, this will wreck choppers. Again, it is well worth it. The problem is, again, it's missiles. There's only 3 of them. And that makes me actually want to switch to get the Roland, because it has 10 missiles. The Jeopard also a very good option here. It has a really good range against choppers. They're both radar. They're both the same price. I mean, the Roland can't fire on the move. It's difficult, but I think for me, the Roland, I like the missile units. I have mixed results with things like the Flak Panzer Jeopard, but I'd grab the Roland there. Again, just 4 trained will do. Now, in terms of artillery and mortars, please don't bother with anything that the Dutch have. I mean, it's all very meh. Go straight down here. For 35 points, you get the HS Point 30. This is 120mm mortar. It's got 57 rounds. You could get 4 trained. Improve the dispersion a bit by getting the hardened. 4 hardened of these should be more than enough. They have decent range. There's absolutely no reason to go for the upgraded version for 5 points. It's only got a few more rounds. Simple as that. Job done. Now, the M752 Lance. I always joke that I love a tactical missile in a game. I've never had access to this before, so I'm going to put it in and try it. You can bring up to 4 of these in your deck. These things fire like the Attackums, however, they have a HE warhead. People won't know if they're coming head-to-head with an Attackums on one of these until after it's landed. So they might run their tanks out of the way thinking it's going to be something that will kill a tank, when actually it kills all of their infantry that they haven't moved. This thing goes off like a 1,500 kilogram bomb is what I've been told. Obviously, you could drop it on a town, but buildings provide defense to infantry against HE, so bear that in mind. The other thing is, this thing melts fobs. If you're bringing this, please bring your own fob, because at the end of the day, it's going to get drained super quickly. Also, expect people to be very upset if you pull out 4 of these at the start of a match. I'm going to put it in because I want to try it, but the reality is people might move out of the way of it very, very often if they see it coming, because it will travel across the map quite slowly. Other options, you could bring your standard artillery pieces. There's plenty of options here. The M109A5 is pretty good. You've got the M110A2, which is really good. There's some good options for standard artillery here. I'm not going to bring any, purely because I'm going to be low on points if I do. So let's move on to tanks. Tanks is where we see some weird stuff. Priced accordingly, but it's weird stuff nonetheless. So let's just have a look at the 2A4. Very standard German tank that we see in this game all the time, 130 points. Let's have a look at the Dutch one. The Dutch one is almost identical, except its AP power is 21. It's 15 points more, but that is a massive boost. Massive boost. In terms of, once you push past the 20 point mark, you're posing a massive threat to a lot of tanks. So, 4 trained of those going in the deck. The reason that this is such a good tank deck, or can be made into a really good tank deck, is because of the option for 2A5s. 2A5s are almost identical, if we just get rid of that. The big difference is that the German one has a slightly better machine gun, otherwise they're exactly the same. They're identical tanks. But you can bring 4 of them, because you get 2 cards. I'd bring 2 trained of those, I'd bring the German ones. I'm not going to put any more in, because for a tactical game, without this being a tank deck, I'm not going to be calling in more than that. Now, you need some cheaper options here. 145, 170, let's bring in something that's around 100 points. Again, you've got some nice options in terms of the Leopard 2A1, which is 100. You've got the standard Leopard 2, which, you know, still pretty decent in terms of its gun and everything else, and it costs 80. If I just pin that Leopard 2 and compare it to the KZP-70, I like this because it's got the autocannon. And the Leopard 2 is obviously a better tank, but it lacks that autocannon. So, about that price point, it's kind of up to you. The 15 front armor is nice, because the Keeler does die pretty quickly, but the Keeler is better against infantry because of that autocannon. So I like adding it. So I'm going to stick the Keeler in there. And I'm just going to take 11 trained, because they do come in. And something even cheaper. I mean, the Centurion is quite nice because of its front armor, but it's super slow. The AMX has basically no armor and very short range, really. The M48 is not the same as it is in WARNO. Don't waste your time. The Leopard 1, these are, you know, these are where we're starting to get identical stuff to the German, basically. There's a little bit of difference in terms of, you know, armor and guns and stuff because of the price points. I sort of tempted to bring something fairly cheap. I think that's pretty good. I mean, the other issue you have here is when you start talking about these vehicles is the range on the main cannon. That's only 2,100. 55 points will get you 2,275 again. Leopard 2 is 8. It's difficult at this stage when you want something cheap for sort of infantry support. I'd be tempted to bring the Leopard 1V. Though that for 40 points is also pretty good. But it's just the range is less. I think we'll go with the 1A4. And just bring hardened so they get an improvement on their accuracy. It's 40 points. It's good for infantry support. That's the main thing I bring that in for. I mean, otherwise, there's nothing else with that higher HE power there. So, if there was like a 4 or 5 HE power in the main cannon, then it'd be worth picking that to take out other infantry, but it's not there. I won't fill the last slot because I was running out of slots when I was practicing looking at these units. So let's move on to Recon. Leopard Verkenning, probably the second best, or certainly in the top 5 best recon tanks in the game. I didn't mean to select trained. Take hardened because they will spot what they're looking at quicker, as in they will identify it quicker. Other options, You've got various vehicle options. You do have an exceptional radar unit at the bottom there, but I'm in two minds. I really like having the exceptional optics, but at the end of the day, you're going to be getting infantry a lot closer. You get these guys, the KCT, they're elite. There's 10 of them. These guys are really good. I bring them in that vehicle. Just bring in 4 veteran. They're going to be good fighters, and they're going to be good at everything, basically. Whether you then bring in the Fernsphere as well, sort of to get behind enemy lines, is up to you. I'd probably stick them in personally. But then you're going to need some cheap infantry as well. Hazaran, regular, 5 strength, very good optics, very good stealth. You also have the BGS, but the problem is they only have good stealth, so not going to be as close to the enemy. I'd bring these guys, I'd bring them in a very cheap vehicle. What's the speed on that? 50, 150. They're going to get to the front quicker because they'll go on the roads. And just bring 9 trained. These guys are just your cheap, cheerful infantry to bring in and get as close to the front lines as possible. You could also go with the chopper options, but they only have very good optics there. So I wouldn't waste your time. The only chopper here, which I think is exceptionally good, and it depends on your playstyle, is this guy. This is the Part 2 Tiger. It has anti-tank, it has anti-air, and anti-infantry with the rockets. This thing is great for getting behind enemy lines and causing havoc, because it's also got good stealth. So it is a nightmare to find. It has exceptional optics, so it will be spotting you and firing at you from a lot further away than you can possibly imagine. So I would actually stick this in. And I realise that I'm taking a lot of recon there, but this thing will be great for harassing. And you could take 2 hardened and just up the accuracy of everything. I've come up against these before, and they were an absolute nightmare. Onto the vehicle tab, there's a few options here. You get all the German options, obviously, but you also get TOW 2. So the nice thing about the Dutch is they get access to various units from various factions, and here you get the TOW 2. You get it either on a vehicle or you get it on a little jeep. So armored or little jeep. TOW 2 is really good. So I can recommend you bring those, but honestly, I'd rather save the points. If I have a point spare at the end, I'll come back and get one of those perhaps. You also get other options like the Flak Panzer, which is really good for anti-base harassment from choppers and things. Get a little Weasel TOW 2 there from the Germans. Again, nice little unit. I have mixed feelings about them, to be honest. There are times when they're very useful, if used correctly, but obviously very susceptible to bombers and will be killed very quickly by tanks if they get in range. Marder VTS-1 used to be one of the best units in the game until it got nerfed into oblivion. Moving on to helicopters, these guys get the AH-64s, which are obviously really good. So you can either have the standard one with your Hellfires and everything, or you can have the AH-64 Escort. I'd stick this in. You've got 1 point there for 1 card. If you're going to take one, take this. 70mm rockets, and you can have 7 of them. For harassment of enemy infantry, that's fantastic for 65 points. Why wouldn't you? And to be honest, you know, other choppers wise, if you're going to take something, take the AH-64 for the Hellfires. Just bear in mind that they're not fire and forget on this one. You have really good air options. You get all the cool German stuff, and you get F-16s. There's your Alpha Jet, nice and cheap. You get the F-104G, which pretty cheap. Use it against choppers, might be reasonably good at that. You get the F-16 Block 1, which again will be good against choppers. Don't get this. Do not get this. It's 90 points. It's ridiculously expensive. F-16A MLU pin. Compare it to the F4F KWS. Gets 1 more ARAM missile. It's fire and forget. It's got the same accuracy. Basically, these are very similar jets, but it's faster and it's got a better turn radius. And it's 20 points more. I would stick that in. I get 2 hardened to those because they're really good. It doesn't mean don't take the 4F KWS as well. In terms of other units, you get the F-16, with its cluster. You get F-16 with HE bombs, and an F-16 with ARAM and Mavericks. Yeah, so click through those again. F-16 with just name 9. F-16 with just name 9. F-16 with ARAMs. What? It's got Mavericks and ARAMs. Pin that. Compare it to the Peace Shrine. Exceptional air detection. Double ECM. Better turn radius. Faster speed. Same Maverick. But it's got ARAM. So it can be used against aircraft. I'm taking those. No, sorry. Accidentally added the Peace Shrine. Anti-tank, anti-air, 2 trained. That'll do. You could take an elite one. I don't think they're badly priced for what you get there. Other stuff you get, obviously you get the F4F, the F4F KWS, which is really good. You get the Peace Shrine. You could go heavy anti-air here. You also get the F-84F. It's a rocket plane. Big rockets, but meh. You get another cluster bomber with 5 cluster bombs. It's pretty cheap. Obviously it's slow. It's got terrible ECM. This is a fly in, do it damage, get out kind of plane. Nothing too exciting. You also get the NF-5B, which is basically the same, only with napalm bombs. If you like napalms, I think it's a good option. It's pretty cheap again. And then you get your Tornado and your Tornado IDS with its cluster bomb, with its big bomb, sorry. That thing is your seed plane. I think that's the only seed plane. So, we've got 5 points left. I would grab yourself probably that for the seed. It's quite an expensive seed plane, but it's got a really, really big range. Except, you know, its optics and everything are really good. ECM's really good. Speed's really good. You only get 1 hardened. Now, I've not got any bombers here. I mean, this is sort of 2 very good anti-air jets and some seed. You could take something for bombing. I mean, you've got some good options with these guys. And this equally pretty good for cluster. That's 5 cluster bombs, 340 kilogram bombs compared to 450 kilogram bombs. So they're probably slightly better. AP power 8, AP power 6. So those are better bombs. But we're getting close to our limit, but we can certainly add that in. Take 2 trained. You've got expensive air units here, but they're good air units, so just use them wisely, because one of these being lost in a 10v10 tactical on destruction, it's costly. You have to play carefully. So we've got 3 points left. Logistics, I wouldn't really rush to take anything else. Infantry is full. Support could take another artillery piece. Tanks, we could certainly take another type of tank. Recon, we're full anyway. Vehicle, I wouldn't waste your time. Helicopters, I'd certainly consider taking something else. Air, we can't afford. Helicopters, what you could do is, with your 3 points left, take the AH-60, but realistically, we've got a really good attack chopper here. Okay, so it's not got the range of the AH-64 and the accuracy, but it's still really good. Taking it would give you the option of playing really aggressively with choppers. Do you bring more artillery? How often do I use artillery? Not that often. But this is the thing. It's what your deck is going to be focused for. This is a bit of a general deck, so it can do a bit of everything. Do you take the artillery away and take choppers and be aggressive with choppers potentially? I think if you're going to take this deck and you're planning to take a lance and you put a fob down, then I think it's worth putting more artillery pieces in here. And I'd honestly consider taking these guys because of their sniping capability. Yes, they have a slow fire rate, but they're pretty good. If we just pin that, You could also think about taking the M109A5. It's got a faster fire rate, less HE power, longer range, and the same accuracy. That's actually quite tempting. You only get 2 of them though. But that is quite tempting. But these are a lot cheaper. I'm going to take those. I'm going to take 3 trained to those. So there's my deck. Let's quickly go back through it. So logistics. We've got German infantry commander, a Fob, a Jupiter, a Mancati 6x6. Infantry, we've gone for the Fliegerforce 2 because I like man-pads in my deck. Corps Mariners 95, Panzergrenadiers 90, Stuttertruppen 95s, and Milan 2s, which you could exchange for more infantry if you were so inclined. Then for support, we've got the iHawk HEOS non-radar anti-air. We've gone for the Roland 3 as a personal preference, but Flak Panzer Jeopard 2 is also very good. The HS30 as the option for mortars because it is the best option there. I've gone for a Lance because I want to try it, and the M110A2 just because I want to have that option in there. Tanks, you have a really good selection of tanks. Go absolutely nuts here. I will build a tank deck with this faction as well because they have such a good selection. Recon, Leopard Verkinen because it's one of the best recon tanks in the game. KCT, Fernspeyer, Huzaren, and a Patu Tiger, which is going to be my annoying attack chopper. Vehicles, not taking anything. Helicopters, I've just taken the AH-64 Escort because you get loads of them, they're cheap, and they have a lot of rockets. Aircraft, you get a good selection of reasonably expensive aircraft here. Use them wisely. You've got the F-16A MLU, which is really good anti-air. Slightly better than the KWS, so I would take that, but you could take both. You've got the F-16 Block ISOCU, which is your anti-tank plane, but it also has really good ARAM missiles, so it can be used as anti-air, and it has really good ECM and air detection and speed. You got the Tornado ECR, which is quite expensive, but it's exceptional everything basically, and it's your seed plane and your only option for that. And then I've taken the F-16 Block 10 for the cluster bombs, just as an option. Again, expensive aircraft, used wisely. So that's the deck. There's a lot of good units here. You could build it very differently to this and still end up with a really good deck, but this is my preference to try out, and I'll see how it works. But as I say, I'm going to try building a tank deck with this one, and I'll probably try bringing a motorized or mechanized deck as well, because I think there's a good variety of units here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon for some more Wargame.